Hello and welcome to this first look exploring session, continuing our journey. This is a return to the Return from Parnassus, a play from the turn of the 16th into the 17th century, sort of 1600-ish, but a precise date is maybe a little tricksy around the edges. It is the second of the Parnassus plays. There's another one to follow after we've done this one, and yes, there's all sorts of questions that we have about this text. We're enjoying it enormously so far, and it's always slightly worried when you're enjoying a play so much that you get to the next session and you go, oh no, everything will go downhill from now on. Yes, we're going to be continuing the journey from these scholars as their life after university, shall we say, what's going to happen to them, of which parallels in the real world may or may not appear. Reading Ingenioso, Consoliodorus, and Luxurio today is...
Liza Graham, wearer of hats in London.
Reading Gullio and Philomusus is...
Rachael Nicole, actor in New Jersey. No hat.
Sans hat. Reading Leonarde, Percival, Studioso, and Second Boy is...
My name is Alexandra, and I may or may not wear hats.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton. I, too, am not wearing a hat, but I can always put a small, cuddly toy dog on my head at a moment's notice. Without further ado, we're going to dive into Act 3. General warning that there might be the odd typo, but most of the typos have started to fade away a little bit now that we've done a bit more work on the text. Some of the asides are marked. Sometimes the text uses brackets to indicate that something might be an aside, but sometimes it also just means it's a different, do it in a different way to way you're doing other bits of the text. Yes, there's all sorts of slightly interesting party quirks going on there. There are very few stage directions, so occasionally we may discuss what's supposed to be going on there. Anyway, Act 3, Scene 1, return of Ingenioso, and I think the first appearance of Gullio.
Now, gentlemen, you may laugh if you will, for here comes a gull.
This rapier I bought when I sojourned in the University of Padua. By the heavens, it's a pure Toledo. It was the death of a Polonian, a German, and a Dutchman, because they would not pledge the health of England.
He was never any further than Flushing, and then he came home sick of the scurvy. Surely, sir, a notable exploit worthy to be chronicled. But had you any witness of your valiancy?
Why, I could never abide to fight privately, because I would not have obscurity so familiar with my virtues. Since my arrival in England, which is now 6 months, I take Sithens, I had been the death of one of our pulling Lightel Tomans for passing by me in the moorfields unsaluted, but that there was no historiographer by to have recorded it.
Please you now, sir, to lay the reins on the neck of your virtuous disposition. You have gotten a suppliant poet that will teach mossy posterity to know how that this earth in such a reign was blessed with a young Jupiter.
I'faith, I care not for fame, but valor and virtue will be spoken of in spite of oblivion. Had I cared for that prating echo, fame, my exploits as Cosmopolis at Calais, at Portingal voyage, and now very lately in Ireland, had been getting ere this through every by-street, and talked of as well at the wheel of a country maid as the tilts and tournaments of the court.
I dare swear your worship scaped knighting very hardly.
That's but a pretty requital to good deserts. He that esteems me of less worth than a knight is a peasant and a Gaul. Give me a new knight in them all in Phano school, at a Nimbrocado or at a Stocado, Sir Oliver, Sir Randall. Base chamber terms. I am saluted every morning by the name of Good morrow, Captain. My sword is at your service.
Good faith, an honorable title. Why, this is the life of a man. To command quick rapier in a tavern, to blow 2 or 3 simple fellows out of a room with a valiant oath, to bestow more smoke on the world with the draught of a pipe of tobacco than proceeds from the chimney of a solitary hall. Oh, but say, sir, you were telling me a tale even now of your Helen, your Venus, that better part of your amorous soul.
Well, remembered. Etas prima canit venerum postrema tumultus. Since soldiery is not regarded, I'll make the ladies happy with enjoying my youth, and hang up my sword and buckler to the beholders, among many dainty court nymphs that with petitioning looks have sued for my love. It pleased me to bestow love, this pleasing fire, upon Lady Lesbia. Many a health have I drunk to her upon my native knees, eating that happy glass in honor of my mistress.
Valiantly done, admirable, admirable.
And for the matters of which oft have I sonneted it in the commendations of her squirrel. And very lately, I remember that time I had a musk jerkin laid, all with gold lace, and the rest of my furniture answerable, pretty slighty apparel, stood me not past in 200 pounds. They froward fates cut her monkey's thread asunder, and I, in the abundance of poetry, bestowed an epitaph upon the deceased little creature.
Oh, in faith, an excellent wit that can poetize upon such mean subjects. Every John Dringle can make a book in the commendations of temperance or against the 7 deadly sins. But that's a rare wit that can make something of nothing. That is, that can make an epigram of a mouse and an epitaph on a monkey. But love is very costly, for I have heard that you were wont to wear 7 sundry suits of apparel in a week, and them no mean ones.
Tush, man. At the court, I think I should grow lousy if I wore less than 2 a day.
The devil of a suit hath he but this, and that's not paid for yet.
I have never seen at the court twice in 1 suit of apparel. That's base. As for boots, I never wore 1 pair above 2 hours. As for bands, stockings, and handkerchiefs, mine hostess, where my trunks lie near the court, hath enough to make her sheets for her household.
I warrant, I wonder such a gallant as you are scapes the marriage of some countess.
Nay, I cannot abide to be tied to Cleopatra, if she were alive. It's enough for me to crop virginity, and to take heed that no ladies dye vestals and lead apes in hell. But seest thou this? Oh, touch it not, it is divinity. Why, man, it was a humble retainer to her busk. And here is another favor, which I snatched from her as I was in a gentlemanlike courtesy tying of her shoestrings. It is my nature to be debonair with fair ladies, and vouchsafe to employ this happy hand in service either domestical or private.
Among other of your virtues, I do observe, you're still to be most pure. Your English tongue comes as near Tully's as any man living.
Oh, sir, that was my care to prove a complete gentleman, to be tam marte quam Mercurio, insomuch that I am pointed at for a poet in Paul's churchyard, and in the tilt yard for a champion. Nay, every man inquires after my abode. Gnats are unnoted here, so ere they fly, but eagles waited on with every eye. I had in my days not unfitly been likened to Sir Philip Sidney, only with this indifference, that I had the better leg, a more amiable face. His Arcadia was pretty, So are my sonnets. He had been at Paris, I at Padua. He fought, and so dare I. He died in the Low Countries, and so I think shall I. He loved a scholar, I maintain them. Witness thyself now, because I saw thee have the wit to acknowledge those virtues to be mine, which indeed are. I have restored thy dilaniated back in ruinous estate to those pretty clothes wherein thou now walkest.
I'm going to pause there because there's quite a lot of this, and there's a fair amount more in this speech, and I think we've got enough to be getting into what's going on here. It's really interesting the way this act opens with basically Ingenioso just running on stage to talk to the audience basically and just go, hey, here comes the next turn. We're going to have some laugh at this person's expense. And yes, the Gull is full of phrases and material. Thoughts from the room about this sort of exchange. I was sort of going, Ingenioso was going to be, doing obviously a lot of doing what he was doing earlier and sort of touting for trade, but actually he's not sort of really doing it. He's just setting this chap up to say things, isn't he? He's sort of the feed, and then occasionally mocks him. Is that fair? Thoughts? There's some lovely turns of phrase. I can understand making an epigram of a mouse, but the epitaph on a monkey, that one's got me interested. Liza, did you want to read that?
I mean, monkeys as pets were, or little marmosets with tails, or little spider monkeys were actually, there was a fashion for exotic animals as pets. There's that famous portrait of a lady with an ermine, for example, and so monkeys as pets are not unheard of in this era. I think the poor things lived a pretty sad life, but yes, I wonder if there isn't a sort of symbolic parallel between the lady's pet monkey and her pet Gullio. Who knows?
Of course, Gullio has lots and lots of clothes.
No,
not
he
necessarily
doesn't. He's lying.
Well, he says he has. I believe every word he says. He is such a trustworthy individual.
That is true, and there are a lot of jokes about going down on your knees to please a lady.
Yeah, quite a lot. Other thoughts in the room? Questions, issues, discussion points. Alexandra, then
I
Rachael.
get the impression coming into this halfway through without having read the first half of at least this play, if not the play preceding it. I wonder whether that might have a bearing on what I'm about to say. I get the feeling that a lot of it is, a lot of what's going on is references to, there was a meow. References to things that as an audience you wouldn't need explained because they would be either kind of recognizable recent events like the Cosmopolis Caddy's Portingal voyage, or to artwork of contemporary authors that again you would recognize that turn of phrase and that moment. So I was looking at the fencing school line at an imbroccata or a stoccato, which would be kind of Italian fencing terms. Who are Sir Oliver Sarandel? And indeed, is this just in how I'm trying to understand what Gullio is doing and why he's a gull. So besides the fact that he thinks himself more wonderful than everyone, is he basically comparing himself to people that the audience would recognize as paragons of that virtue, that other skill, and going, but I'm better than them?
Yeah, yes, he's very voguish, and yeah, I think there's a lot of that because, of course, he's a complete gentleman, and he's a poet, he's a fencer, he does all the things, absolutely, and it's all true. Liza.
I think in that paragraph, it seems to me, anyway, that Gullio is... Ingenioso has said, "Oh, you must have nearly been knighted." Gullio isn't a knight yet, and I think Gullio is saying that he'd rather be known as Good Morrow Captain and as a good fencer and duelist than as Sir Oliver or Sir Randall. I wonder if Sir Oliver and Sir Randall. They may just be generic knight names, or they may be a reference to Roland and Oliver from the Song of Roland. Who knows? But I think that they're like, I'd rather be known as a good fencer than as like Sir What's His Face.
And yeah, this is I think the first scene where I've sort of genuinely gone, okay, I really need to you really need to fine-tune some of this to really get across what's going on, because there's so much that is very of its within its world in a way that I didn't quite feel with earlier. There were lots of things in the earlier sequences where things were possibly going over heads, but I still was more in tune with it, whereas this kind of figure, there are modern analogues, but the details are very, very time specific. I'll go to Rachael.
Could Gullio mean something like gullible, and he's like a gullible patron that Ingenioso has finally found a patron that will, loves his sucking up?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, he's puffing him up as much as possible, as much for his own amusement, I think, as well as to get him to be a patron. This gull is. Sets himself up. I mean, you don't really need to set him up, but Ingenioso just keeps prompting him in different directions. He keeps nudging him to see what he can get out of him. Anyway, we should gather more data, unless anyone has any additional things they want to throw in. Liza.
One, just that I love the shout out to Sir Philip Sidney. Certainly one of my faves. He was sort of an early Elizabethan rock star, in that he wrote a lot of really good sonnets to a lady he almost married but then didn't, and then decided he was in love with her anyway and wrote a bunch of sonnets. Married someone else. Also had some very close male friends and admirers, many of whom were also poets, who wrote poems about him. And died very young in battle in the Netherlands. And pretty much everyone who was anyone who was capable of holding a pen in their hand wrote poems about how sad that was and how tragic it was to lose him so young. And
yes, there's a big afterlife for Philip Sidney, and yes, we have an episode of the podcast that does feature elements of his afterlife, and also the complete Astrophil and Stella is also available on the podcast as readings. But we must move on and gather more data. So yes, we've got one noted writer, and of course Gullio has, he's pointed at for a poet in Paul's Churchyard, where all the literary people hang out. So, and I'm sure that's true, because Gullio wouldn't lie to us. So maybe we'll get some more literary references coming up. That might happen. Let us go on. So he's just been talking about his the ruinous state of those petty clothes, and Ingenioso is going to do an aside mocking him at this point.
It is a most lousy cast suit of his that he before bought of an Irish soldier. Durst envy otherwise report of your excellency than I have done, I would bob him on the pate, and make forlorn malice recant. If I live, I will limn out your virtues in such rude colours as I have, that your late nephews may know what good wits were your worships most bounden.
Nay, I have not only recreated thy cold state with the warmth of my bounty, but also maintain other poetical spirits that live upon my trenchers. insomuch that I cannot come in to my inn in Oxford without a dozen congratulatory orations made by genus and species and his ragged companions. I reward the poor ergos most bountifully and send them away. I'm very lately registered in the rolls of fame in an epigram made by a Cambridge man, one Weaver fellow, I warrant him. Else could he never have had such a quick sight into my virtues. However, I merit his praise. If I meet with him, I will vouchsafe to give him condign thanks.
Great reason the muses should flutter about your immortal head, since your body is nothing but a fair inn of fairer guests that dwell therein. But you have digressed from your mistress, for whose sake you and I began this parley.
Mary, well remembered. I'll repeat unto you an enthusiastical oration wherewith my new mistress' ears were very lately made happy. The carriage of my body, by the report of my mistress, was excellent. I stood stroking upon my hair, which became very admirably, gave a low congi at the beginning of each period, made each sentence end sweetly with an oath. It is the part of an orator to persuade, and I know not how better than to conclude with such earnest protestations. Suppose also that thou wert my mistress, as sometime wooden statues represent the goddesses. Thus I would look amorously, thus I would pace, thus I would salute thee.
It will be my luck to die no other death than by hearing of his follies. I fear this speech that's a-coming will breed a deadly disease in mine ears.
Warden, fair lady, though sick-thoughted Gullio makes amain unto thee, and like a bold-faced suitor kins to woo thee.
We shall have nothing but pure Shakespeare, and shreds of poetry that he hath gathered at the theatres. Sick-thoughted Venus makes amain unto him, and like a bold-faced suitor gins to woo him.
Pardon me, my mistress, as I am a gentleman. The moon, in comparison of thy bright hue, a mere slut. Antony's Cleopatra, a black-browed milkmaid. Helena dowdy.
Mark, Romeo and Juliet. Oh, monstrous theft. I think he'll run through a whole book of Samuel Daniels.
Thrice fairer than myself, thus I began. The gods' fair riches, sweet above compare, stain to all nymphs, more lovely than a man, more white and red than doves and roses are. Nature that made thee with herself had strife, saith that the world hath ending with thy life.
Sweet Mr. Shakespeare.
As I am a scholar, these arms of mine are long and strong withal. Thus elms by vines are encompassed ere they fall.
Faith, gentlemen, your reading is wonderful in our English poets.
Sweet mistress, I vouchsafe to take some of their words and apply them to mine own matters by a scholastical invitation. Report thou, upon thy credit, is not my vein in courting gallant and honorable?
Admirable, sans compare. Never was so mellifluous a wit joined to so pure a phrase, such comely gesture, such gentlemanlike behavior.
But stay, it's very true good wits have bad memories. I'd almost forgotten the chief point. I called thee out for New Year's Day approacheth, and whereas other gallants bestow jewels upon their mistresses, as I have done whilom, I now count it base to do as the common people do. I will bestow upon them the precious stones of my wit, a diamond of invention, that shall be above all value and esteem. Therefore, sithens I am employed in some weighty affairs of the court, I will have thee, Ingenioso, to make them, and when thou hast done, I will peruse, polish, and correct them.
My pen is your bounden vassal to command. But what vein would it please you to have them in?
Not in a vein, pretty faith. Make me them in 2 or 3 divers veins, in Chaucer's, Gower's, and Spenser's, and Mr. Shakespeare's. Mary, I think I shall entertain those verses which run like these. Even as the sun with a purple-colored face had ta'en his last leave on the weeping morn, etc. On sweet Mr. Shakespeare, I have his picture in my study at the court.
Take heed, my masters, he'll kill you with tediousness ere I can riddle him off the stage.
Let us in. I'll eat a bit of pheasant and drink a cup of wine in my cellar, and straight to the court I'll go. A countess and 2 lords expect me today at dinner. They are my very honorable friends. I must not disappoint them.
And they exit. And yes, so we've got. I mean, it's a shame for Ingenioso because this guy is exactly the kind of patron he needs. Unfortunately, he doesn't have any money, and so it's all a bit of a shame because he's just there to be mocked. And yeah, it's full of jokes and things which it's very difficult to make land, even if we may get some of the references. Some of them are quite obscure. I'm assuming that Samuel Daniel borrows a lot. That seems to be the joke there. But all of the joke is doing something slightly different.
The joke may simply be that Gullio is stealing from everyone, including Samuel Daniel.
But even so, it's not a joke that's likely to land today. We kind of need to find some analogues for some of it. Yes, I think someone's put in the chat about this very pointed reference to a Cambridge man and one Weaver, who again it seems to be that's the kind of references that we're getting here that are very pointed, that don't necessarily land for us today. Which is a shame because there's a lot of wit and some really occasional eeky moments, as it were, that sort of come out of nowhere. But yeah, any other thoughts about this sequence with Gullio? It has some high points, it has some low points. Milo has opinions. We've heard the cat's point of view has been heard. Who wants to leap in? Anyone got any thoughts? You don't have to have thoughts. We can just move on. Alexandra.
A quick internet search reveals that Samuel Daniel was a late Elizabethan, early Jacobean poet, playwright, and historian who apparently had a massive influence on other contemporary writers, such as people who shall not be named. So it might be that the joke there is that Samuel Daniel is the one who was stolen from.
Possibly. I mean, we've done some Samuel Daniel. We haven't done all of Samuel Daniel, but we have started.
He wrote one of the earliest sonnet cycles, I think. So any writer of sonnets, I think probably in English probably wrote.
I think what I'm going to just say at this point is that we should be careful about trying to expand on things that we don't necessarily know the answers to.
Being loudly wrong is kind of my brand.
Yeah. And yes, we've got some we have some Samuel Daniel fans in the house because we have done at least one play. We have done his Cleopatra, which sort of runs us to the logic of that. The way that line runs, actually. So yes, there's an interesting crossover stuff that's going on there. I say, as ever, I want to keep the focus on how the play functions for us, rather than try to gloss things that we're not in a position to gloss. Alexandra.
Yes. So my point was that the inference there is either that our man is Gullio is plagiarizing intensely, or that he's intensely derivative. Both of which I feel work. In regards to how this works in context, I feel like, again, because we maybe don't get all of the shout outs, the ones that we're getting are not landing as amazingly as they could, partly because we're not able to connect to all the parts, if that makes sense. So it's the sort of thing where I understand who you're laughing at, but not why. Whereas this joke would be so much funnier if I actually knew all the context.
Mm. And that's the thing, is that maybe for a modern performance, you stick a load of analogues in that might work rather than go for the original. But that might be lazy. That might not work. So yeah, all sorts of things. Rachael.
I think it's interesting that he mentioned Chaucer and Samuel Daniel and Spenser. All these people who are like famous for the time, and he's talking about how much money he has, and he's courting Ingenioso, and if he had all this money, he could, not Chaucer because he's passed away at this point. Yes, he wrote in like the 1200s or the 1300s or something, but these other people who are still alive, like Samuel Daniel, he could afford them. So why is he hiring Ingenioso? There's a lot of a huge gap in the truth of him and who he really is. And it's also that thing where I don't know, when people do student films, they're like somebody who's like a Charlize Theron type, like, and they tell you to act like all these other people who have established brands and not your brand. He doesn't want whatever Ingenioso would write. He wants a knockoff of somebody else.
Yeah.
At a price.
Yeah, and it's and Gullio is basically talking to a shopping list of derivatives that he kind of wants here. And Ingenioso is saying, "I'll write anything you like, any style. I'll do those things. Show me the money first, though, please. Show me the money." Anyway, we should move on to we're going back home, everyone. We're going back to Consoliodorus. Father of one of the lads. I can't remember which one he's the father of. The other one is, I don't know, his nephew or extended family member, mate. But Consoliodorus and the much enjoyed earlier Leonarde. So we'll see what they have to say, because they might be moving the plot along. There is a plot somewhere, people. There is a plot.
More importantly, there are hats. Mr. Consoliodorus, are you within? God be here.
What? Leonarde? Fill us a cup of beer for Leonarde. What good news, Leonarde?
Oh, I have had great affliction since I saw you last. Tib is fallen sore sick of the glanders, and Dan, poor Jade, I think he hath eaten a feather. But I have letters for you, and as many commendations as there are green grass betwixt you and them. I told them of their behaviour, I warrant you. I told them how costly their nurturing was, and they might by this time, if they had been good boys, have learned all their books. I chid them roundly, without balking, for blowing at tobacco. I told them plainly it was nothing but a dock leaf steeped in a chamber pot. By cock, Mr. Consoliodorus, I did such good upon them that I think by this time they are gone into the country to teach. I warrant Mr. Philomusus will prove a great clerk. He is such a ready man of his tongue. Yet I think Mr. Studioso is as well book-learned as he is.
I pray thee, Leonarde, go in and eat a bit of meat. I'll follow thee straight.
You, master, we that are stirring betimes have good stomachs, but I'll first lead my horses to the hay-rack. They, poor jades, are as shallow as a cloak bag.
And exit Leonarde.
Henceforth let none be set by careful sires, nor sons nor kindred to Parnassus hill, since wayward fortune thus records our cost with discontent, their pains with poverty. Mechanic arts may smile, their followers laugh, but liberal arts bewail their destiny, since no Maecenas in this niggard age gardens the sons of muses and of skill. My joyless mind foretells this sad event, that learning needs must leave this duller clime to be possessed by rude simplicity, and thither hasten with a nimble wing where arts do flourish like the gaudy spring. Too long sweet birds have carolled in our woods, too long they nightingales have joyed our groves, if thus they be rewarded with disdain. Henceforth night ravens nestle in our trees, and screeching owls dwell in those leafy cages, where erst did chant the springtime's pretty pages. Never dare any bold attempting pen seek to expel the tyrant of the north, rough barbarism, that in these acorns times commanded our whole island as his own. But stay, my tongue too lavish of her terms. Pray God the times be faulty of this ill. I fear me, the times be innocent, while guile doth cleave to their unstayed youth, in truanting their time, wasting whole years, without or feeding time or harvest hope. Howe'er it be, blameworthy am not I, that cared for them with a wakeful eye. Little I have, that little must maintain that little scene of life which doth remain. My son, my soul, ere long, will leave this house of clay. Death's night will come, and end my living day.
Don't send your children out for an education, people. You'll end up penniless, and your father will die alone. Yeah.
Don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys and or scholars.
Yeah, it's as ever, Leonard is full of some good stuff. I love that thing about tobacco. It's nothing but a dock leaf steeped in a chamber pot. Just say no. And I like the line, fill us a cup of beer for Leonard. I'm half wondering, I mean, it could be that there are additional servants, but I'm just thinking of the context of the performance space is that just to the audience, someone just pour him a drink, will you? Kind of moment, and how that works. But yeah, they're still just as boldly written. They're still really quite fun. They're resetting a sense of where we are in the play before the end of the act. Thoughts in the room? Any love for Consoliodorus? He's not happy, Bunny. He's not happy at all. Liza, then. Alexandra? No, Liza. Liza just muted herself.
Let's have Alexandra go first.
Okay.
I just wanted to make an observation of the way in which Consoliodorus speaks in this speech that he has on his own, which is, first of all, a very poignant contrast, a very pointed contrast to the clarity of the prose that Leonard uses just before. But also, it's interesting to me that we've just had an entire scene of, I am a poet, I am so poetical. And then along comes this person who actually does express himself in such high language in a serious way. And I'm thinking in terms of putting this on as a production, does the fact that we've just spent an entire scene laughing at poetic language completely undermine this moment? Or is it more interesting if we can make it so that as an audience we actually do start to feel for him?
Yeah, and I think there is an interesting question that once digging into this, see whether there are deliberate quotations or there is a deliberate style that this is that there are hints as to how that should be performed. But you're right, it is a nice contrast that this person who in theory probably isn't actually that learned himself is the most poetic of the lot, and I quite like that. And the priorities that they have. Liza, then Rachael.
Yeah, I like Consoliodorus's use of rhymed verse. It sort of, it emphasizes that he's of the older generation, and it takes him back to earlier dramatic writing. On the other hand, the horses are in a very bad way. Glanders is serious. It's also known as farcy, and it's It's a bad disease of the legs, and the other horse may have eaten a feather. If a horse eats a large feather, the shaft of the feather can perforate their stomach or intestines. Small feathers are fine. But yeah, poor horses. I hope they'll be okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a joke format, that opening, because of course it's, a Consoliodorus is asking, what are news of the two children? And he goes, and of course, what's his immediate reply? Well, the horses are very ill. Oh, your thing. So yeah, but you're right. It's a very serious state of affairs, and which again speaks to Leonard. It's absolutely on point. He knows his stuff. What needs to be done. Rachael.
The father in this, was it in Glass of Government? There was some other play we read where the father was very he was played very straight and very dramatically, but it was a comedy, and it was a very woe is me type father situation. And if I wonder if that this old style writing, perhaps if at the same time I don't know what the acting techniques were like, but if there was also a shift towards an older acting style, if that might give it some, I don't know, it'd be like grandiosity or hamming it up that might make people laugh, just because it wasn't a way that people expressed themselves on stage anymore, or was associated with an older generation.
Yeah, all different playing companies or different styles. There's an awful lot of play at that. You get that in Boyd's Company's plays and school plays as well, where there seems to be deliberate play at what the conventions that other people do are. So yeah, it's very probable. And it's to say there's a whole series of questions of layers of meaning that we've probably lost along the way, of which that's a hint at. That maybe we'll want to use that as a filter for looking at. Excellent. Let us go into Act 4. That's Act 3 digested. It wasn't very long. They're not very long. And we return to, we've had a bit of a daddy break as we go back to Gullio and Ingenioso.
The Countess and my lord entertained me very honourably. Indeed, they used my advice in some state matters, and I perceived the Earl would fain have thrust one of his daughters upon me. But I will have no knave priest to meddle with my ring. I bestowed 20 angels upon the officers of the house at my departure, kissed the Countess, took leave of my lord, and came away.
I think he means to poison me with a lie. Why, he's acquainted with ne'er a lord except my Lord Colton, and for countesses he never came in the country where a countess dwells. Faith, sir, I must needs commend your generous high spirit, that cannot endure to be stinted to one, though she were a goddess, considering that there are so many ladies that sue for your favour.
I think there is such a saying in Homer, ut amoris amabilis esto, that is, be a complete gentleman, and the ladies will love thee. Howsoever prating Tully in his poem saith, cum amoreni eram miser, when I loved I was a drivel. Yet he was well taunted by another poet in this golden saying, vir sapit qui parum loquitur. That is, Tully might have held his peace with more honesty. True it is that Ronsard spake, the pecora si fa illo pola mangia, which I thus translated. Quis amat ranam hutat esse dianam, and thus extrapolate into English, what man so ever loves a crane, the same he thinks to be Diane. A dull university's head would have been a month about thus much.
Is it possible you should utter such high-spirited poetry without premeditation?
As I am a gentleman and a scholar, it was but a sudden flash of my invention. It is my custom in my common talk to make use of my reading in the Greek, Latin, French, Italian, Spanish poets, and to adorn my oratory with some pretty choice, extraordinary sayings. But have you finished those verses in an ambrosial vein that must kiss my mistress' dainty hand? I'll now steal some time from my weighty affairs to peruse them.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I have made them in their several veins. Let them be judged by your elegant ears, and so acquitted or condemned.
Let me hear Chaucer's vein first. I love antiquity, if it be not harsh.
Even as the flores in the cold of night closed slepen in their stalkes low, red resen them the sun bricht, and spreaden in their kinde course by row. Right so mein Ian, when I up to thee throw, they bin eclaired. Therefore, O Venus dear, thy micht, thy grace heried be it here. Nor scrivener, nor craftily write, blot a little the paper with me tears, not mit me gladden the while I endite, but this poor scroll that the name I bear. Go, blessed scroll, a blissful destiny is shapen thee, my lady shalt thou see. Nocht fitteth me in this sad thing, if I fear, to use in jolly terms of merriment. Solemn terms better fitten this matter than to use in terms of good content. For if a painter a pike would paint with ass's feet and headed like an ape, it cordeth not, so were it but a jape.
No more. Now, in my discreet judgment, this I judge of them. They are dull, harsh, and spiritless. My mistress will soon find them not to savor of my sweet vein. Besides, there's a word in the last canto which my chaste lady will never endure the reading of. Thou shouldst have insinuated so much and not told it plainly. What has become of art? Well, die when I will, I shall leave but little learning behind me upon the earth. Well, those verses have purchased my implacable anger. Let me hear your other veins.
Sir, the word as Chaucer useth it hath no unhonest meaning in it, for it signifieth a jest.
Hush! Chaucer is a fool, and you are another for defending of him.
Then shall you hear Spenser's vein. A gentle pen rides pricking on the plain, this paper plain to resalute my love.
Stay, man. Thou hast a very lecherous wit. What words are these? Though thou comest somewhat near my meaning, yet it doth not become my gentle wit to set it down so plainly. You scholars are simple fellows, men that never came where ladies grow. I that have spent my life among them know best what becometh my pen and their ladyships' ears. Let me hear Mr. Shakespeare's vein.
Fair Venus, queen of beauty and of love, thy red doth stain the blushing of the morn. Thy snowy neck shameth the milk-white dove. Thy presence doth this naked world adorn. Gazing on thee all other nymphs I scorn. Whene'er thou diest, slow shine that Saturday. Beauty and great grace must sleep with thee for aye.
No more. I am one that can judge according to the proverb, bovem ex unguibus. Mary, sir, these have some life in them. Let this duncified world esteem of Spenser and Chaucer. All worship sweet Mr. Shakespeare, and to honor him will lay his Venus and Adonis under my pillow. As we read of one, I do not well remember his name, but I am sure he was a king, slept with Homer under his bed's head. Well, I'll bestow a French crown in the fair writing of them out, and then I'll instruct thee about the delivery of them. Meanwhile, I'll have thee make an elegant description of my mistress, like in the worst part of her to Cynthia. Make also a familiar dialogue betwixt her and myself. Go now in, correct these verses.
And exit Gullio.
Why, who could endure this post put into a satin suit, this haberdasher of lies, this brachydocchio, this ladymonger, this mere rapier and dagger, this cringer, this foretop, but a man that's ordained to misery? Well, Madame Pecunia, once more for thy sake will I wait on this trunk, and with soothing him up in time will leave him a greater fool than I found him.
And yes, Ingenioso so incensed at this ladymonger that it remained muted briefly. There's a lot of some fun. There's some fun stuff in here. There's gags. Again, they're gags that you're sort of going, okay, these are schoolroom kind of gags. These are stuff where you're only going to really have that land if they know these references and how they're landing. But the general joke that works really nicely is, yes, if you'll just write some verses in whatever style I throw it, it's whose poem line is this anyway? And, he gets to do his Chaucer impression. He doesn't get to do much Spenser because it's too rude. He gets to say pricking.
Pricking means spurring, like spurring your horse into...
Yeah, I'm just...
Even if Milo doesn't agree.
Yeah.
Hey, dumbass.
But Gullio doesn't agree. That's the more important thing. He's not impressed, and not impressed with most of it. Rachael.
I think there's so much good stuff in this scene. The frustration of somebody just saying, do whatever, I'll be fine with whatever, because that usually means they have no idea what they want. And, it's not just bring whatever and we'll be satisfied with it. It's something so specific that they don't even know. And then also, his harsh criticism of Spenser and Chaucer, I think that says something about, critics, especially that he's like, I think this is some like artistic saying something about like critics or patrons or something, and how they don't get what an artist gets because an artist has this, you know what I'm saying, like that type of perspective, or just the frustration with having to work with somebody who has no idea what they want.
Well, it's not only not. I mean, I say the fundamental flaw here is that we keep having these intimations that Gullio doesn't have any money. I'm slightly confused because he's talking about doing this stuff for money, but as a patron, Gullio doesn't seem like he's actually worth anything. So unless I'm overstating something or missing something, because he says he's got money, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence that he actually does, and he's certainly not. I would be asking for the money up front if I was Ingenioso, and that's sort of the flaw here, is that it's all here as the setup for this comic situation, but ripping into him mercilessly means that why is he putting any time and effort into these poems? I mean, I presume he's not actually putting any time. He's just making this up as he's going along. But I do love the Chaucer. I think the Chaucer is really nice. Actually, there's some nice little bits and beautifully spoken by Liza. Alexandra.
Yes, and I do think it's potentially an opportunity at the time, certainly an opportunity if you were to put this on now, to spoof a whole bunch of recognizable either authors' styles or kind of dramatic styles or performative or what have you. So you could make it could be that the purpose of the setup of kind of him demonstrating things ahead of getting paid is entirely just so that we can, laugh at all the authors and then never actually reward the clown character, as it were, within the world of the story. So and I think you could have quite a bit of fun with that in the if you do what you were suggesting earlier, Rob, of kind of rewriting these sections, these segments, so that they are contemporary references to an audience contemporary with us.
Because it does seem to be a problem peculiarly of this Gullio sequence, where the number of references start overwhelming the text. Whereas earlier we had situations where there were references, but actually the comic situation functioned more on its own weight. Whereas here, I think the balance is just slightly tipped towards self-referentialism, which is harder for us to do things with today. But not impossible. I think still the general shape of it lands. My worry is this is the second scene we've had with Gullio and Ingenioso, and now I'm going, okay, is this joke wearing a bit thin now? And that worries me as well on a practical level. Liza.
I am wondering if there may be a parallel between Gullio's love of Italian rapier and his fanboyship of Shakespeare. They mentioned Romeo and Juliet earlier, and a lot is made in Romeo and Juliet of Tybalt being a duelist rather than a soldier, that he's said to be a... Okay, forget I said anything.
Would you like to rephrase that in a way that we can actually broadcast?
Okay.
He's really interested in sword fighting, isn't he?
Maybe I'll say... Anyway, an interest in rapier and dagger was denoted, one of these obsessions of the youth of today. It was foreign, it wasn't British, it also wasn't good, honest swordsmanship like a soldier would use. Instead, it was the sort of martial art you would use for street fighting, which was disorderly and frowned upon and illegal, but all the young men wanted to do it anyway because they wanted to be fashionable. And I was wondering whether a line might be drawn between Gullio's obsession with Italian rapier and his fanboyship of a certain playwright who may at that time have his fans may have fallen into a type, much as fans of some TV shows do today.
Yes. Any other thoughts about this scene before we go into the next one? Rachael?
Just what Liza said, how there's a turn from this, that we see before this interest in soldiery, and then turning to this swashbucklingness, I think is an interesting shift, kind of like the Robin Hood that we did the other day.
Yes, which sadly the viewers at home can't see, but though they may be able to see some material on that. That was something we did for a conference, though we did do some initial work on that. That is available on the podcast, and there is some video footage that may get released at some point in the future. We're having fun today. Okay, we're going to go to what I'm now calling scene 2, because everybody's exited. Enter Percival, who has gone up in the world, and in a moment, though there is no stage direction, he will be joined by Philomusus in about 4 lines' time.
Masters, the case is altered with me since I was here last. They call me no more plain Will, nor William, nor Goodman Percival, but Mr. Warden at every word. Well, if you please me well, ye mayhap make the bells speak some time for this. But stay, I seek our sexton, and yonder he is. Now, good sexton, I am as tired as any of my plague jades with inquiring you. You should have peered for Mr. Mayor his mastership for what you want. The parish have put up a subligation against you and say you are the most unnegligent sexton that ever came these 40 years and upwards. For in Jenkins' days, well may the bones rest of the old good sexton, the chancel was kept in order, the church swept, and the boards rubbed, that thou mightst have seen your face in them. And for my part, I never used other looking glass. Well, he would have got our prelate Haddle up service. Moreover, they say the bells are never rung, and they complain you are too proud to whip the dogs out, as your predecessors have done. Thus much I can say of mine own knowledge, that since you were sexton, the parish dogs have not been ashamed to bewray mine own pew.
But I pray you, in brief, what did the magistrates conclude of Philomusus?
Faith, Philomusus, ways me for you, good lad. There's sorrowful tidings. You are out of office, and I was ready to cry to hear the sentence pronounced. Yet thus much of friendship, I bespoke you a passport, lest the clericals at some town's end catch you. Well, give me up your keys, for I must be gone.
And exit Percival, presumably with keys.
Take them, for they are better lost than found. That day I took them did my fortune frown. Yet may I see fortune's inconstancy, as well in this as in some dignity. Long since I gave a farewell to good haps, and bade them cozen me whom they would for me. I long had been their faithful follower, yet reaped no guerdon but disgrace of them. Come, cold and scarcity, for you have been my faithful bedfellows this many a year, and kept me company in sorrow's bed, where care hath chased slumbers quite away, that would have ceased upon my watchful eyes. Long since my fortune's sunshine's been eclipsed with foggy clouds and made as black as pitch, so that I see my mournful funeral of all good haps and fair felicity. My thoughts like mourners follow this my hearse, my sobs resound like to a passing bell, and dreary sighs ring out my doleful knell.
And enter Studioso to rejoin his old friend.
Oh, is it so? Will fortune ne'er have done? Long since I thought that she had left me quite when she had brought me to this slavery, but now I see she hath more whips in store to scourge my corpse and lash my galled sides. My blooming flowers, which did daily wait to be refreshed with an April shower and promised some fruits in latter years, are now quite nipped with the chilly frost and blasted by the breath of Boreas. Thus, alas, my winter now is come, ere I had thought the springtime had been done. But who is this? Philomusus, I see. He carries the old characters of melancholy in his face. I'll put him out of his dumps. How now, Philomusus? How goes the world with you?
They're worse. Seldom better. Once again, I must go wander now from place to place, till it please fortune to take me to her grace.
Art thou to seek thy fortunes new again? And so am I. I'll keep thee company till fortune give us one a resting place. I think it is ordained by destiny that we should still match in adversity. But I pray thee, Philomusus, how did the parish fall out with thee?
I was put out by a stuttering church warden because I would not be a dog whipper. The clown told me such an absurd tale, how since I was sexton, the dogs have not been ashamed to array his seat. But why should I recite this drivel's speeches? To conclude, I am put out and am sent away with a passport. But tell me, art thou put away now for whipping the young master?
No, not so. I am put out for a matter of less importance, marry, because I would not suffer one of the blue coats to perch above me at the latter dinner. My young master, whom I taught, was very forward to have me gone, and told his mother he never learned in a great book since I came. My mistress, with a shrill voice, cried, "These scholars are proud, these scholars are proud," and sent me packing away.
Every tawny trull, each mincing dame, each ambling minion may command the arts, kill a poor scholar with a sudden frown, place or displace him or as her humor pleases. Minerva, see, and shame to see these sons made servile drudges to the female sex, of less repute than is each whistling groom, each unrefined hind, each start-up clown.
It heats thy blood, endeared Philomusus, to see the haps of thy unhappy friends. It grieves my spirits to see thy great deserts so little guerdoned by this thankless age. The gaping grave they could, dead carcasses of more humanity than living men, seemed alate to pay to thy poor stale some tribute, pence, for meaner maintenance. So learning is of senseless things regarded, though scarce of any living white rewarded.
Well, Studioso, better hap befall thee in whatsoever art thou livest or breathest. I mean to change this heaven for another, and find or better hap, or kinder grave. Alter I will my soil, but not my mind, that lives with thee, so souls live where they love. When as I tread upon a stranger earth, I'll think on thee, and with a deep-breathed sigh, recount our springtime's hapless destinies. Then straight a smile shall smooth my clouded brow, whilst hope persuades me of thy happiness.
Nay, where thy haps be nipped, my hopes must. The air that not rewards thee scorneth me. Then let us fly together with a wing, whither good stars and happy fates us bring.
As I was loath to pull thee from thy friends, distract thee from thy country's sweet embrace, to rob thy lips from sucking of that air where first thou sawest the gaudy flattering light. So now my parting heart doth leap for joy, since I shall have a mate for my long way, whose talk will add wings to the tedious day.
Come, let us cast our cards before we go, summon our losses if we ne'er return, cross our old cares, and turn the leaf anew, and after give our soil a long adieu.
And they exit the sound of the smallest violin in the world, playing specially for them. As they exit, they've both got the sack. As the plot suddenly returns, unnegligent rather, Sexton, who's not stopping the dogs from doing things, interesting character point actually about Studioso, because we're talking about how he was the slightly chipper one, geeing everyone along, and we get this sort of hint here that maybe he's always being so to cheer up his friend. That actually, his despair at times is actually quite deep, and actually there's a front he's putting on. I don't know why I'm trying to add character layers to a text that doesn't necessarily have them, it's nice to have them back. It's nice for them to compare notes. I love Studioso's stuff about how he lost his job. I was enjoying that. Rachael.
It's what Lois put in the chat, that the blue coats are servants and the scholar is insisting his university degree makes him a gentleman and hence deserving of a higher place at the table. Helen is saying this too. I don't know, that just helped me because I don't know any of this stuff, and maybe it'll help anybody watching or moving forward this further for us down the line.
Yes, because it's this problem he's been having is that he's expected to wait at table, and that's not what his position should be about. That's what was stated. It's in his contract was he was to wait at table, so he's quite miffed about that because that's not what their position should be. Is that where it was? Something along those lines. I just love the way the young master steps up and just goes, "He's not taught me anything from the book." I was just going, "Yeah, that's because of you, you little." Other thoughts? Rachael.
Helen also put that the passport for Philomusus is so that he's not taken for a vagrant. That's also something I didn't pick up on in the text.
Yeah, here's your P45, and off you go. Or is it P60? I forget. Which one is it? It's been so long. One of the two. Take your tax form and be gone. I'm very rarely employed in that fashion, so I wouldn't really know. Other thoughts about this? Again, we feel on slightly firmer ground for most of this. It's quite playable. It's other thoughts in the room. Stop being witty on chat. Speak to the viewers at home. Rachael.
No, this is just such a these plays are just such a like first 2 years out of college type plays, that all these jobs are their first, and it feels like such a letdown that they're so like heartbroken to be fired, or even though that's just something that happens sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And actually, this is we've spoken about this in the previous play as well. Liza made that point. That there are these things that do leap at us across the centuries, as going, yeah, we feel quite seen, and that's a really good point actually about the job market after you've left education, and you're not going to get the job that perhaps you wanted the first time round, and it is all despair and who knows, we don't know. For all we know, they give up on a career and they all work in a supermarket for the rest of time, or the early modern equivalent. I don't know where it's going. I don't know, but we see various people grifting away and trying different things. Anybody else on this before we dive into Act 5? Okay, Act 5. We return to Gullio and Ingenioso as we go Act 5, Scene 1.
How now, Ingenioso, didst thou, according to my direction, deliver my letters?
I did, if it please your worship.
What answer did fair Lesbia, the mistress of thoughts, return me?
She took your letter and read it over.
And surely by this time she is mightily enamored of me.
And after she had read over your letter, she gave it me again, as if she knew you not.
Not know me? You are a very jack to mistake my mistress in that sort. Such an inhumane word could not proceed from the mouth of my sweet mistress. No less than 1,000,000 of times have I participated on to her both mercurially and martial discourses in the active and chivalrous vaunt of Don Bellerophon. How often of yore have I sung my sonnets under her window to a consort of music, I myself playing upon my ivory lute most enchantingly.
The devil of a musician he's acquainted with, but only Jack Fiddler.
Whence should this change of hers proceed? Canst thou not guess?
I cannot imagine, except that young gallant that stood dallying with her be some rival in your love.
Have I a rival? By Bellona, my goddess, he should die. Could I meet with any such audacious, puny long cloak? I would make him not refuse the humblest vassalage to the sole of my boots. But I warrant my mistress mistook. Indeed, I use not to send on such messages such unmannerly knaves as thyself. Thou shouldst, according to thy portion of wit, have described unto her the perfections of my mind and body.
I gave you as sweet a report as was possible. I said, there is not a more complete gentleman on the earth. But all would not serve the turn. She gave you a nescio, and your letter a scornful smile.
True it is that Virgil saith, quid pluma levius, flamen, quid flamine, ventus, quid vento, mulier, quid mulier, nihil. These pulling minions had rather have a carpet knight, a capering page, than a man of war and a scholar. Ha! Ha! See thee now. I smell it. It was your duncery wrought me this disgrace. And yet I adorned thy seely invention with a pretty witty Latin sentence. Henceforth, I will not nourish any such unlearned pedants. These universities send not forth a good wit in any age. I'll travel to Paris myself, and there commence for filius nobilis, and converse no more with any of our base English wits, which have somewhat corrupted the generous spirit of my poetry. As for the suit, thy witty lines have thus dishonored me. Thy Maecenas have here caceres thee, and doth bequeath thee to the travelling trade.
Sir, it was not my lines, but your Latin that spoiled your love market. To say the truth, I delivered your letter, and was rewarded with the terms of, what, you saucy groom, are you bringing me such paper wisps? From what satin suit, I pray you, comes this? What foretop bewrayed this paper? And when I named you, what Gullio, that known fool, said she.
Why, That's very true. My fame is spread far and near. But why said she that she knew me not?
Belike she was ashamed of you before her gallant, but interrupt me not. If it be his, said she, I am sure not a word of it proceeds from his pen, but a sentence of Latin, which I was told is false. Well, warn him that he look to his rheumatic wit, that he bespit paper pages no more to me. If he do, I have some porter or bear word to cudgel the vain braggadocio.
Peace, you impecunious peasant. As I am a soldier, I was never so abused since I first bore arms. What? You vassal? If a lunatic bawdy troll, a pocketing queen, detract from my virtues, will thy audacious self dare to repeat them in the presence of this blade? Were it not that I will not defile my hands upon such a contemptible rascal, and that I will not have my name in the time to come, where myself shall be chronicled, disgraced with the base victory of such an earthworm, I would prove it upon the carrion of thy wit. My Latin was pure Latin, and such as they speak in rhymes in Padua. Why, it is not the custom in Padua to observe such base rules as Lily Priscian and such base companions have set down. We of the better sort have a privilege to create Latin-like knights, and to say, rise up, Sir Phrase, but sirrah, begone, thou hast moved my choler. Report of my clemency that in mine anger, contrary to my custom, I suffer thy contemptible carcass to possess thy cowardly ghost.
What, you whoreson tintinabulum, that thou that art the scorn of all the good wits, the ague of all soldiers, that never spokest witty thing but out of a play, never heardest the report of a gun without trembling, why, Monsieur Mingo, is your ass's head grown proud with scratching? Thinkest thou a man of art can endure thy base usage?
Parents, thou art a gentleman of thy word, familiaritas parit contemptum. Sirrah, Alexandra did never strive with any but kings, and Gullio will fight with none but gallants. Farewell, base peasant, and thank God thy fathers were no gentlemen, else thou shouldst not live an hour longer. Base peasant, peasant, so Heres may pull dead lions by the beard.
And exit Gullio.
Farewell, base carl, cloaked in a satin suit. Farewell, guilty ass. Farewell, base broker's post. Too oft have I rubbed over thy mule's dull head, fed like a fly on thy corruption. Now had I rather live in poverty than be tormented with the tedious talks of Gullio's wench and of his luxuries, to hear 1,000 lies in one short day of his false wars at Portingale or Calais. My freer spirit did lie in tedious woe, whiles it applauded bragging Gullio, applied my vein to sottish Gullio, made wanton lines to please lewd Gullio. Attend henceforth on gulls for me who list. For Gullio's sake, I'll prove a satirist. I heard that Studioso and Philomusus, discontented with their fortunes, mean to try another heir. They appointed to call on me at Gullio's chamber in Shoreditch. I'll thither, and truss up my trinkets, and inquire after them, that our fortunes may shake hands before they part. Then I'll go to the press, they to the seas.
And exit. So yes, finally, all of that repressed rage that's been pushed down, just repress, and then thump, comes out with some wonderful invective on both sides. They both really, really go for it. And of course, he's at that first thing of just sort of he's sort of paying it out slowly, because if the first iteration of what happened was I handed a letter, didn't know who you were, and then, well, actually she did know who you were, said you were a fool, and then, okay, let me spell it out for you. This is what went down. and then we get swords. We get some lovely bits of dialogue. We got some lovely stuff. So thoughts on the room, Rachael?
I don't know. This was such a wonderful use, I think, of prose here in this scene, between the two of them. And also just the scene in general is such a wonderful, like, blow up at your boss scene, like the sort of like in movies now when somebody wins the lottery and then walks into work and starts going off on their boss and then looks at the lottery ticket and is like, oh, and then there's that pullback, but without that pullback. So much fun.
And this sort of 3-part structure that this sequence has, that has at least a payoff here. There is a structural logic now to this, which I'm quite liking, and the way that flows is quite satisfying. Other thoughts? Anyone else want to throw in? Come on, people. You have thoughts. I know you have thoughts. Liza.
Well, what strikes me is just the poisonous nature of the scholar to patron relationship. That it's terrible for the scholar, and he resents his patron so much. And it's, given that these plays were written by impoverished college students, or I assume impoverished college students, since there's so much, so many references to poverty and so much poverty portrayed, or relative poverty, or at least the fact that patronage of scholars is a seller's market rather than a buyer's market. It tells the scholars who are watching it that seeking out patrons is hell and serving them is hell. It wouldn't necessarily make its watchers want to become patrons of scholars either, since some people at that university would be rich people's sons who were essentially buying their degrees.
And yes, it's that thing of just going, I don't want to be doing this kind of thing anymore. I'd rather be poor. We'll see how long that lasts. He'll prove a satirist. He's going to write something for somebody else about him that will make money.
I wonder if satirist is a more or a less base form of life than a pamphleteer. And he intends to go back to the printing press, but he's heard that his two companions want to go to sea.
Yes. Are we setting up something there? Is that important? Because the plot interceding on these gull scenes. But yeah, there's some lovely things, and of course that sort of that never spokes wittish thing, but out of a play. You don't have wit, you just quote things. I'm not suggesting for a second that that's basically what we do on this thing. Alexandra.
It's also absolutely not at all what students are kind of entirely built to do by the system. On that subject, actually, it's I found it interesting that we went from poetry in the sense of English language poets that would be recognizable names, or recent artists that we can make fun of without naming so that we don't have to deal with lawsuits. We're now looking at, it's your Latin that ruined you. It wasn't, I didn't do anything, it was you. But yes, we're now in the third scene where Gullio and Ingenioso are kind of doing kind of the same shtick, but on a slightly different subject. So again, how do we keep what would have kept it fresh or interesting at the time if it's the same style but joking on 3 different subjects, or what would we need to do to make that work nowadays?
Yeah, it's a lot. It is a lot, and there's a lot of material with just 2 people doing effectively stand-up, or a comedy sketch that's going on. And yes, it does progress, and we get a payoff at the end, but there's a lot of difficult negotiating of that. I feel that there's a risk of the evening going like that for a while, whereas I think originally there's enough there that the audience at the time would be absolutely on point with, and I think that on pointness has got a little blunted. Anyway, we need to dive into... We've got 2 more scenes to go. They're not very long, but we need to get into them. So Act 5, Scene 2, Luxurio. We haven't seen him for a while, and we haven't seen the boy for a while. I'm assuming it is his boy. Let's see what kind of gig is going on here. More hat action is available. So, Act 5, Scene 2, take it away.
There is a beast in India called a polecat. That the further she is from you, the less she stinks, and the further she is from you, the less you smell her. This dry country is that polecat that creates such an unsavory smell in the nostrils of a liquid scholar. It is better nowadays to be a mute than a liquid, and a consonant crier than a vocal academic.
Why, Master, are you grown melancholic?
For faith, no, boy. I have a jolly soul that scorns sorrow. But I'm in some choler with this ass-headed age, where the honourable trade of ballad-making is of such base reckoning. But so it hath been in ancient time, when Homer first set up his rhyming shop, one of the first that ever was of my trade.
Why, was Homer of our trade? I took him to have been a blind harper.
Oh, blind he was indeed. That is the only difference between us. And ere long I'll drink out mine eyes, and then be as true a Homer as Memin Aede Thea. Yes, he was poor in his life. I was as very a beggar as he for his soul. No man cared for him in his lifetime. I'm sure I'm in as little reckoning as he for his life. 7 countries strove about him when he was dead, and I doubt not, when I am made tapster of the lower countries, and the works of my wit left behind me here upon earth, many a town will challenge unto itself the credit of my birth. Howsoever, now I am a plain si nihil atuleris ibis Homere foras. No penny, no pot of ale.
Indeed, sir. No doubt but that countries will miss you when you are gone, when they shall have a calf with 5 feet, see a hare at a crossland, hear a pie chatter or a raven sit upon the top of a new kitchen. They shall want their old poet to impart it to the world, and their young Ismenius to sing it at the stall. They maidens shall want sonnets at their pails, and their country striplings ditties to sing at the maids' windows. The cart horses will go discontented for want of their wonted music, and the cows low for the want of their luxurio. But as for your tapstership in hell, it were a good office in so wet a place, and unless you provide you some such place, your dry soul will quickly be out of drink.
Faith, well said. I mean to drink the world dry before I leave it, and not leave so much as the element of water for generation. Let us loiter no longer, lest the clerigols catch us, but travel towards our friends, to be kept like honest old beggars by the parish. Farewell, dainty poetry. I kiss my hand, and humbly take my leave of thee. Thou art but a ragged patroness, and so I leave thee.
She makes her followers ragged, and so she leaves them. But let us march forward to the confusion of these cellars, which our thirsty souls shall besiege.
Farewell, thou musty world, I mean to bear no coals, and therefore will I straight drink out these seeing holes.
Farewell, thou impecunious clime, Luxurio and his page will beggars prove elsewhere, and run from thee in rage.
And exit Bob Dylan and assistant.
For the times they are a-changing.
Yeah, vocal academic. I like that. For this trade. Nobody appreciates you in your lifetime. Why does he bother? Why does he bother? But all the normal people, they won't get their ditties. Who will supply them with their lovely ditties? What will the normal people do?
Oh, how the cows will suffer.
Yeah.
Those poor cows, if a calf is born with 5 legs and there's no one to write a song about it.
Does it make it moo? Yeah. Important questions. It was lovely to see Luxurio again, and nice to know that they're also getting on this boat. This boat seems to be filling up. A lot of stuff going on. Rachael,
Are they getting on the ship of fools?
I don't think it's a ship of fools. But I do think they are getting on. They are all getting on some kind of. Well, maybe they are getting on a ship of fools, but not
I
the
don't
one
know.
from the play we did the other day.
I don't know whether it's. Any ship that Luxurio gets onto will by definition be a ship of fools. But I think that it's Studioso and Philomusus who intend to leave the country. And Ingenioso is going back to the printing press, and Luxurio and the boy, who he's turned into an underage alcoholic, are apparently going to turn beggars and just go on the road.
Oh, they're not going on a boat. I misunderstood that. Okay, they're not. I thought they referenced something in their dialogue. Obviously, I am wrong. This is why I'm here.
Well, no. I'm not 100% wedded to being right about this.
No, I thought I saw something. But no, I think you're right. I think I misheard water and misunderstood the kind of water we were talking about. Anyway, we need to finish the play. There's only one more scene to go. Act 5, Scene 3, Ingenioso, Philomusus, and Studioso are in the room all together at the same time for the first time in quite a while. Let's see what the band does when they get back together.
Nay, sigh not, men, laugh at the foolish world. They have the shame, though we the misery. Strange regions well may scoff at our rude clime, and other schools laugh at Parnassus hill, that better do reward each scrivener's pen, each tapster's cringe, each rubbing hostler, than those that live like anchors in a mew and spend their youth in contemplation, because they would refine the ruder world and rouse the souls in clayey cottages.
Scholars cried long ago, the world was naught. And yet, like Marius mules, they labor still to get these arts, these poor, contemned arts, as though they studied with a wakeful eye to go the nearest way to poverty.
I'll spend no Trevan breath in this stale theme. Full oft have I chid this unkinder world, told groves and murmuring brooks of this sad tale, rated my luck, my thwarting destiny that trained me up in learning's vanity.
Rail we for ear, asses will follow kind. A fox may change his hair, but not his mind.
Yea, Midas brood fore'er must honoured be, while Phoebus' followers live in misery.
Nor envy I each painted dunghill store. A scholar is always better than a boor.
Well, fawn the world or frown, my wit maintain me. The press shall keep me from base beggary.
To Rome, or Rheims I'll hie, led on by fate, where I will end my days, or mend my state.
And so will I. Herd-hearted climb. Farewell. In regions far I'll try unkindness tell.
If scholars' wants would end with our short scene, then should our little scene end more content.
But scholars still must live in discontent. What reason then our scene should end content?
Till then our acts some happier fortune see. Will banish from our stage all mirth and glee.
Whatever scholars
Discontented be,
Let none but them
give us
a
plaudity.
And it ends. So, yeah, I think what I've got in my head now is, okay, so the pilgrimage to Parnassus, that's for the first years when they're arriving. And this is for the third years. This is when people are leaving. And just to depress them before they go. That sort of feels like the emphasis on the two. It's structurally interesting what's gone on with this one. This is a longer play than the last one. The last one was very short and sweet. Whereas this one, you get a slight sense of self-indulgence in bits of this going on. And things. We are joined by Lois, who's been lurking in the background. Hello, Lois. Just general thoughts about that closing. It's a nice closing. I quite like that. It's quite fun. But it's basically a three-way epilogue, which is quite nicely delivered. Alexandra.
and it literally ends with, if you're unhappy and you know it, clap your hands.
Oh, yes, that's excellent. So yeah, other thought. We can sort of drift into general thoughts about the play overall. The close of the play. Thoughts from the room. Anyone want to leap in? I think I've given my groat's worth. It's a smaller room. It's always harder to drag thoughts out of a smaller room. You know, when there's about a dozen people, it's easy. Lois, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed hearing this. I think it would be the ideal play, really, to do at an academic conference or in some kind of academic setting. I mean, it would be extremely interesting, nearly all of it, I think, to an academic group. I mean, and probably not terribly interesting to anybody else, but I mean, there's so many lines where people would be like, oh, how true. Yeah, it's still just like that, and so on. And also it is kind of balanced in the way that it does show that these guys in some ways do make themselves unemployable in a lot of contexts. I mean, they're not necessarily all that pleasant to work with. And, you know, they basically want a completely different life from the one that's on offer. That bit at the end about going to Rheims or Rome is really very odd, because that implies, you know, if we can't get jobs in this country, then, you know, we'll go to Russia. You know, I mean, it's that sort of thing. You know?
It's the brain drain. Yeah. I have to say, I was sort of thinking with some zhuzhing, as it were, technical term there, that actually, rather than the sort of the academic conference side of things, but more the just the sort of students' union side of things, you could craft something that would actually appeal. I think within a student context, actually, this could function very well. I think that there are degrees of interference with the text that you would go with. So if you're going for your conference-based thing, then you leave it pretty much be. But for I definitely think that with some interventions, this is actually quite playable. I think it only got really self-indulgent in this second session, actually. So far, it's not been self-indulgent in a way that this kind of drama can be. Alexandra?
And it might need less intervention than we imagine if it is performed to students of this subject matter, i.e. People who are studying either sort of literature or possibly classics or something like that, because it takes the opposite. Well, one could try and put it on in such a way that it has the opposite effect to the alienation that it would have for a lot of people who don't feel like this is important information for them to know. For the people who are studying, yes, early modern British history, or they're studying English literature, all the jokes are in jokes because they are about your specialism and within your particular range, which I don't know about the history of the performing of the way in which this play was performed. Is that the kind of context that it comes from?
Oh, it's a university play, absolutely. But it's interesting that with this session that we've done today, the skewing towards literature has got so much heavier. The whole of that Gullio section, is not really like what happens in the rest of the play and the previous play. It's quite a unit in its own right, and it's slightly distorting the shape of the play. It's got a wafer thin narrative. They go to Parnassus, they come back from Parnassus, or translated as they go to university, they leave university and go into the job market, which as a plot is works perfectly well for us today.
An audience of graduate students, particularly in the States, would certainly be in raptures over it, because it's exactly the situation there. Graduate students, all of whom want university jobs, and a lot of whom are not going to get them. In the first one, Liza made this point about there's on the road to Parnassus is littered with people who sort of fail to complete their degree. One of whom is from pure academic burnout, but speaks quite truthfully. And of course, people who just get distracted by drink and sex and other things.
Puritanism. Puritanism.
And Puritanism, yes, that one, which does happen. So yeah, there's a lot of it that works. It's just I do feel structurally as well that this one needs some tweaking, just as dramaturgically. Whereas the last one I thought was actually very nicely shaped. And of course, we've got another one to come. I don't know if they get on the boat and they do some boat stuff. I don't know yet it's even longer the next one as well. They get there's a sequential numbering system that's going on. It's going to take 3 sessions to get through the next one. So it's a hit. It's a popular hit as a setup. So they keep producing them. And the first one was a rush job. This one looks like they may have spent a bit more time on it.
So basically, it's Parnassus Avengers, Parnassus Age of Ultron, Parnassus Endgame.
Yeah, Parnassus Extended Universe. Oh yes, yeah, and putting the uni in universe there. So thank you. Here all week, try the veal. Okay, we'll go into final thoughts. Rachael, do you have anything to close on about this play overall?
I think there is still a like a universality to this play. It's like there's Lois sees how academics would tap into this. I think a lot of artists could tap into this. Also, just the way that they go about their first jobs, like they don't get a written letter of recommendation from anybody going into their next jobs, or even getting paid from some of them. There's so much that they don't know how to do yet, that they do clumsily, that I don't know. It's so interesting. It's such a very I forget the name of that movie with Ethan Hawke and Winona Ryder, where they're like young people in their 20s, but it's like one of those things that people in their early 20s, I think, really sympathize with, and you get older people, I think, an older audience could also be into it because it's kind of like baby's first steps into the job market, and it's like always been this way kind of type of thing. You know what I mean?
Yes. Do you remember your first job? Yeah, kind of setup. Absolutely. And it's that question of the question of how terrible their jobs are, and how terrible at their jobs they are, and that sense of this cloistered life that they've had for a few years at Parnassus, not setting them up very well for the realities of the real world. So there's give and take, because of course there's satire and comedy going on throughout this as well. So how sympathetic or unsympathetic we are can ebb and flow. Liza, any final thoughts?
Well, just that I think Rachael is right that there's some universality, like to anyone who's ever been a student, or anyone who's ever, anyone who's ever sought employment or been desperate for a job or worked for an unreasonable boss or for a boss that you're smarter than. There's even things like poor old Philomusus, who's a sexton who can't even deal with the minimal job requirements of being a sexton.
Stopping dogs peeing on the cushions.
Lois, do you know what the significance is of the passport that Percival gets for Philomusus when he gets fired? Is that what lets him leave the country, or?
No, Helen's mentioned that. I mean, it really keeps him from being arrested for vagrancy, because you weren't supposed to go out of your parish.
I had a thought there to follow up on, and I've lost it. I've lost that thought. Liza, did you have more, or are you?
I think that was all I have, although in my typical fashion, I'll probably think of more when it's actually someone else's turn to speak.
Excellent. Alexandra, any final thoughts?
Well, not having had, as I keep repeating, it may be a minor issue that I have no idea what happened in the rest of the play. But what's been happening in the part that I've been around for has been a lot of tying up of storylines, not necessarily of ends, but we see I think two of the characters that I read, that those were actually their last appearances. I think even before Act 5, so it's not as though, this structurally this has been a situation where the plot kind of gets set up really early, unravels, and then we just wrap it up at the in the last couple of scenes. It seems to be it's got a lot of endings. Or at least it's taking its time to conclude what's happening to the various people, which made it strangely sudden for me that all that happens is to the last three is that they get on a boat together, or they are seen to be leaving, going, this was a bad idea. I've wasted my time over here. Let's go and find other people who can feel as disappointed in this waste of time that has been university as us. The end. So I'm wondering whether there's something structurally happening that you guys have noticed that I haven't, on account of not being around or on account of just not noticing. Is this play doing something incredibly clever with how it's constructing the characters and their third lines?
I'm not sure that it is. I think it gets. I think it gets distracted with the gull sequence, and then it vaguely does callbacks to characters we met earlier, and then it stops. I think the it's it sort of runs out of steam about halfway through, and there's some great stuff that works in its own right, or within its own original context. But I don't know that structurally it's wholly satisfying. I think there is work to be done.
Okay,
Yes.
new theory. This is part one. Is it possible that it ends on an unsatisfying sequel hook because it is a sequel hook? Because actually what we want you audience to do is spend your money on the next one.
I believe the part one is just added because at some point there's a part two. I don't know that they have that as a deliberate thing in mind. It's not impossible, but I don't know if we have evidence that that is the case. I could be wrong on that point. I know the second one actually, the next one, or part three, if depending on how we want to number these things, also has a different name, but is generally known as Return to Parnassus Part 2. So just to confuse you on that level, it might be that they had in mind, well, we've done one of these, we might do another one, the Further Adventures of Parnassus. Even though we are moving further and further away from Parnassus, so that its smell of this polecat becomes more and more distant, or whatever that speech was about, which I have to say I did slightly lose the thread of. Lois, having lurked through much of this play, any final thoughts that you want to throw in?
As I recall, the second part of, the bit that comes after this was a couple of years after it, so it's not clear whether they were thinking of a second part, or it has to some extent this sort of end of term review aspect to it, or something like Cambridge Footlights, a series of review sketches, and then somebody kind of ties them together and forms a vague sort of plot around it. Because that's what generally tends to happen with these university shows. It's sort of, if it could have been several people putting things together and then someone trying to control it. I think there's also a theory that Ingenioso is Thomas Nash, or at least that he kind of gestures towards Nash's career. Not that Nash had exactly that career, but still, looking for a patron and so on, that very much was Nash, but of course it was everybody.
Yeah, and before I close and go see if anyone has anything they want to throw in, well, we have run out of time. I'd just like to say that as anyone who is supported by patrons, we love our patrons. Our followers and supporters on Patreon are wonderful, wonderful people, and we don't resent you at all. So on that note, no, we don't actually. We have a lovely relationship, and it's not like we're sitting on a single massive patron who's just a total arse. The load is spread out in a delightful way. And if you're not a patron, do join us. There are bonus exclusives. We try to get things out early, and as we go into the future, as we go back into production post the strangeness that is our current situation, we hope to be giving our patrons more of a say about the kinds of things that we produce. On that note, I'm going to thank all the wonderful readers for their wonderful reading. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye. I will have no knave priest to meddle with my ring.